Maple syrup. Hey.
Oh, that was nice. You sang that.
Yeah, sometimes I just showed it, but this time I actually sang it.
There was melody to it.
Welcome, everybody. It is the Maple Syrup Show. It is Wednesday night, and it is 9:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we come on the air and chat with you about game design and the industry and all that kind of stuff. You might notice that we are missing a couple people. We are actually missing both our guests, and there's reasons. We're not going to go into the great details. Just know that everybody is okay, but there was a little scare, and there's also blackout conditions in New York. So we just decided let's reschedule for next week. So Carol Mertz and Kai Karhu will be here next week to hopefully talk to us some more about Karhu, about the NYU Game Centre, and all sorts of stuff. Carol also works for Exploding Kittens, and so we've got lots to talk about next week. It'll be great. So until then, we're actually gonna just talk to you from here. So if you have any questions for myself or Erica about game design specifically, that'd be great. And until you come up with questions and until I see them in the chat, I am literally just going to interview Erica.
Is that? I thought we were going to talk about like things.
Oh yeah, but I'm going to interview you. Sure. So Erica, what is your stance on? Let me read the notes that I just wrote. Oh my gosh, they fell. Oh no, they're here. Here they are. They're underneath the controller. What do you think about the current state of shipping in the industry?
Oh my God, it's craziness. Actually, you know what I really hope is going to come out of this? So anyone who doesn't know is basically, if you don't have buying power right now, there's a very real chance that like all your stuff's going to be left in a shipping container on a dock somewhere until they can squeeze it in. Just because there's a difference between someone throwing on one container versus the person who could throw on 10.
Yep.
So what's happening is that a lot of containers are getting left on docks for a while, which is problematic in itself when people start complaining about, because God knows if that thing was baking in some heat and what that's going to do to warpage, but we won't get into that because that's a whole other problem. So that combined with how expensive wood and paper are right now, publishers are going to be in a lot of trouble and there's nothing they can do about it. Now, what I'm actually hoping is going to come out of this is there's really none of the smaller guys have ever really band together much. Like occasionally you'll see smaller publishers get together so that they have a larger distribution catalog, which is something else we can talk about later, because it makes it easier to get your games picked up, right? So I'm really surprised, but I'm very hopeful because this hasn't necessarily really been a thing before, but there's so much more buying power if they all got together.
Yeah. If they just formed some alliances, right?
That's my stance.
Like the Riders of Rohan and the Elves.
But seriously, so let's say that I have a crate, you have a crate, a few other people, some halves or whatever. If we could arrange to all be on the same dock, we are now not the one crate going on. We may now have the buying power of 4 or 5. So we're going to get on where that another person with the one is now waiting.
Yeah, it's a real. It's like it's a hierarchy, right? There's a real buying power is king currently, and it really is always. We just never felt it like this before, in a way where people are getting really like literally the short end of the stick. So a crate or a shipping container, they by themselves aren't actually that expensive. You could buy one and just load it.
Make homes out of them now.
Yeah, you could buy one and load it with whatever you wanted, and have other people load on with you. And now that you own it, that makes it easier to have one. But you're still not going to get it loaded if you only have one.
That doesn't mean it's getting on the boat, though.
No, that's the thing. And so most small publishers, if you're doing like a print run of like 1,000 games, you have literally room for 4,000 more games probably in that shipping container. So there have definitely been people who are buying up shipping containers, which is interesting. They used to only cost like, I don't know how much they cost. It wasn't actually much because there's not much to them. It's mostly air, right?
Kind of like a corrugated metal.
Yeah. But now they're actually becoming quite expensive because people have started to do this. So this whole economy that's spinning up around this, the inflation around it is just literal supply and demand. Like if you needed to do a study on supply and demand, this is it. It's
Yeah.
perfect. And so there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now that I've seen a couple small companies get together to, try to ship together. I know that, there's definitely small companies like Kids Table Board Game and, off the page games that are banding together to get games into distribution together, because Off the Page Games has one SKU and Bird
Yeah.
Island Games, Kid Table Board
Yeah.
Games has several. So they're using each other to leverage access to different areas and different marketplaces, which is really, I think a good idea.
I think it should
Uh,
get bigger.
yeah, right. And I mean, that's why Asmodee is as big as it is in a way, because they can afford to move things because they have economy of scale. They have so much that, first of all, if you're in one of Asmodee's work groups and you need to print something, what printer out there isn't going to move a little things, to get on Asmodee contract, right?
Unfortunately, the little things they're moving are usually everybody
Well,
else.
like, littler companies, right? So it's this thing, like, do little companies stand a chance against big companies? I mean, sure, in an economy where the scaling is correct, right? Where everything's fairly flat, right? We have an economy that's not flat anymore, where it's only the biggest companies, and
Their demand's too high. And so the difference is, like, I think I was seeing numbers. I mean, they're still crazy. Like, let's say $25,000 for, just to get the container going. But at the same time, now imagine someone who has millions of dollars of product moving instead of just that $25,000 container. So it does make sense why the boats fill up the way they do, is because somebody, like a Walmart or something, can walk in and say, I'll take the boat. Now, my other pseudo prediction, though, especially since a lot of countries are now talking about this, is the next person who can position themselves to be some sort of shipping route. And if they undercut everybody, will instantly, and I mean instantly, be the one everybody's going to.
Yeah. So this is really interesting because Eric Lang and I and a bunch of other people at that maybe 4 years ago, might have been at the gathering in 2018 or 2019. We were talking about like extinction level events for the tabletop industry. And I don't think any of us came up with this.
Shipping and wood, guys, shipping or paper.
But it's true because shipping by itself is like the most volatile part of any of our jobs. Because we don't ship from within our own countries typically, because we don't manufacture in Canada, the United States, or Germany. Well, there's some manufacturing in Germany. There's a little bit of manufacturing here and there, but
we
it's
have
not
the
same
capability, though. And so what I'm curious about is if people, because of this insane cost of shipping, I gotta assume that it would actually be easier to print a lot of these things domestically now, because the cost of material difference has got to be way more offset than what it would cost to ship.
Well, I mean, just in terms of shipping, the cost to airdrop something is almost the same as it is to ship it by freight now.
Yeah.
Which is ludicrous. Because
but think about all the local places, right, that have the capabilities, right? Might take a little retooling here or there. Yes, there's an up cost, but it's already in your country.
Yeah. So, and here's another thing. There are actually several presses and printing things that are sitting idle in storage that we know of.
I would think that too, because a lot of print mediums had to go on pause.
But they also just shut down in Canada and the States. They just didn't make them anymore. But what did they do with the machines? The machines are still good or good enough. The other thing, though, is so I've heard from some people in printing, like, American and Canadian printing machines are like not state of the art at all.
Because they haven't been updated.
They've never been updated for 20, 30 years.
You know what's interesting is because, like, let's say you just get something, like get someone running again for cards, because that's not necessarily the hardest thing to do. We have insane capabilities amongst a lot of the different industries and universities for different types of printing methods, especially 3D printing, plastics, all that kind of stuff. I gotta think, especially if you could be just that little bit creative, all of it's already there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think all of it's there, but I think there's a position to take that you could possibly do this. The question is scale and labor. right? So I've asked JT a couple times, hey, JT, why don't we start a Game Crafter Canada? He's like, well, do you have $1.5 million? And that's just to do not offset printing. That's like one-off printings, print on demand machines. Offset printings are like you'd have to create. It's just a lot of machines and a lot of space. Space is also a premium, but Canada and America are very large countries, so there is space out there. We do have card companies. There are companies that do just cards.
I figured you'd have to probably string a few different things together to get this going.
Yeah,
start.
It's mostly the plastic that is the hard part. Just even yesterday, John DeCampos was talking about molding, and he said, Americans quoted me $7,000 for a single mold, and the factory in China was like $4,000, and you can gang mold 4 things at once.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's just a difference in either know-how.
To be fair, though, if it's going to cost you $25,000 just to get this shipped over here, you may as well have just done it here.
I mean, yeah, perhaps, right? So it's a real good question there, Erica. Like, what should we do about it, or what can be done about it? Because Mr. and Mrs. Single issue designers, we're not going to do anything about it, but we can talk about it. We can think about how would that happen, or if there was a way to do it, what would that look like? The labor costs themselves. So oftentimes, a lot of people would say, it's the labor costs. It's Americans and Canadians not wanting to work for as cheap as the Chinese factories, and partially true, but also why not? I mean, that's the cost of shipping is astronomical at almost any time of the year.
Yeah, I would be curious to see, what a per unit cost. Like, that's the thing. A lot of people just think per unit cost up front, and they're not thinking per unit now after the shipping. So what I'd be really curious is how far apart those really are at this point.
Yeah, and I'm sure somebody smarter than me and you has done the math. So I'll go find that later.
But you know what? I got to think the biggest problem actually probably is the time and effort to coordinate things locally, because there's not someone who's just already set up for it. Though I got to think it would be worth it financially if you're willing to do the legwork.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're willing to pay somebody else to do that. So, I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but factories in China don't make absolutely everything that gets put in the game. A lot of factories have like buyers that will source from other factories. Oh, you need 6 billion pawns? We can make that in 4 days for you.
Someone else already makes that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they source parts, from other factories that make the parts that they need. And, if they use them enough, eventually they'll buy that factory. So we are already paying for somebody to do that. And there's actually really cool markets where you like walk around and people have like, this is the widget we produce. Mm-hmm. And it's just this. And we can make, 40,000 a week. How many do you want? I'll take 80,000. That'll be 2 weeks. That's it. That's what you do. And they make little toys or they make little pieces, and it's like a buyer's market for these types of things. And you just like say, this is my quantity, this is how much I want, and then you pay them. That's it. And they ship them to your factory because you have a factory too.
Well, that's the thing. Like I get product samples from factories all the time, and I actually use those to like work on game designs because I was like, well, someone already makes these. So even when I go to pitch a game, I can be like, hey, guess what? This crazy piece that you would not want to make yourself, it's already sourceable. And I'm like, if I can buy it for this amount, trust me, you can do way better.
Right. Zach Connolly has a great point. He found a U.S. manufacturer, but they have a minimum product order of 2,000 copies. And Zach feels that his company is still only a 1K copy company at this time. Zach, do you want to tell us what the company was, just so other people might look into it if they have a 2,000 copy company? And that's the other thing. Like a lot of the flexibility and price break gains that you get through China are much better than what you can get in America, simply because the cost of spinning up the machines and doing all the setup and stuff is expensive. By the way, that is your biggest cost.
Well, I was going to say,
it might not be any more with wood being the way it is.
It's because we have laws on like pollution and stuff like that. That's what you're really paying for, the extra cost. Once you're going to China, you're basically saying, I'm going to pay for a government that doesn't care about that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways. But there's also other things like labor laws and all these other things that may get in the way of people doing what they want to do here
Well,
in
that's
America
what I
and
was gonna
Canada.
say. It's just looking. It's looking for the what country's gonna let me do what I want to do kind of thing. But I think often we forget at the expense of the people doing it.
Yeah. And I mean, there's definitely the other side of the story where people at the plants in those countries would say they're very happy and they're happy to do what they do and get paid with what they get paid. So it's all sort of relative in some ways when you think about it. And to
Depends on the
ascribe
company.
Yeah, and to ascribe, so if you're looking for a printer in the States, there are definitely like resources for you to go to where different brokers. So, like if you go through Panda Manufacturing or GPI or anything like that, they don't actually necessarily own the factories that they print at. They usually are brokers in between the publishing house and the factory, so helping with the communication, doing the project management, that kind of stuff. Um, but they will usually, hopefully, have vetted that factory that they work with to make sure that it's as ethical as possible. So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good point is, watch your ethics when you're working with things. Oh, so Zach's talking about Delano. So Delano is a company in Michigan, if I'm not mistaken, sorry. And yeah, they do uh, decent work for very generic parts. Like you're not going to get a lot of custom anything out of Delano. But if your game can survive without custom stuff, then
Or sourceable. Like
yeah, or
that's the other
sourceable
thing,
stuff, right?
right? Is like there's always it gets a little obviously it's easier just to make your own, but if you have a game that basically it could have, pieces that are already out there and, come in maybe more, standard print materials that you're looking like we were talking about, like the cards or things like that, you might be able to do the assembly yourself, which is honestly what there is a lot of, hobby publishers that do partial assembly on their own because it is better to
Yes.
source things.
Yeah,
And
I
so
mean, there's the whole cheap ass games mentality from around like the early '90s, where James Ernest said, "Hey, I'll give you the rules for the game, I'll give you the board and the cards, but you need to produce the dice and the pawns because we can't make those." And those games were like, $10 each, and they were sold in an envelope,
mhm.
and that's it. Adam has a great question. He says, I've been thinking about this for a long time. Maybe it's a good time for less traditional formats for hobby games that can make use of domestic book publishing expertise and the like. And in fact, I have actually talked to some people, even just yesterday, as early as yesterday, 24 hours ago, Adam, that is exactly what happened. A couple people are pivoting from board and card to doing it in like an adventure book format or something like that. Much easier for prose
A
heavy
bookbinder.
games and things
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
I think of like the choose your own adventures or the light RPGs or like, those different book systems.
Yeah.
As you're saying, it would just be a bookbinder.
Yeah. So book systems where they might have pieces, but it's mostly book, that can work for sure.
Especially if
And,
you
and I
just
mean,
source
yeah,
your pieces. Going
yes.
back to that again. Yeah.
And that is something that is totally doable in Canada and the US. There's like, depending on the number that you need, there are definitely printers like Maxim is a printer in Canada that can do like comic books and things like that. There's European publishers for all of that, or printing houses for all of that. There obviously is still Chinese factories for all of these things as well. So yeah, lots and lots of interesting stuff there. So yeah, is this a good time for the hobby to pivot a little bit? We've seen
To be
already the
fair,
popularity of role playing games over the pandemic. So
yeah. And
yeah,
I really do think, I mean, anything at this point, if they try to do the same thing, you're not going to get anywhere. This is like the perfect timing to start trying out, uh, not necessarily like financially, but new possibles, new ideas, new avenues, new venues. Like the way you would traditionally do something may not actually exist any longer. And so, if no, I'll be really honest,
you're right.
because there's a ton of things that are going to evaporate. The way we knew them is going to be gone within the next year, and that's just the way it is, because they're not viable anymore. They're not usable anymore. They're not whatever. So, I mean, the very fact that there's going to be a crap ton of change raining down very, very soon anyway, you may as well start figuring out, well, I may as well just be the cause of my own change and try to do things that might work for me rather than trying
get out
to
ahead
react.
of it, right?
Get
proactive.
Creative about what you're doing, because guess what? Something's going to crumble anyway. So at least if you can pivot, don't do it because you have to pivot. Do it because there's likely a pivot coming, and you should already be thinking about this.
Yeah, get out in front of it. Pivot hard if you have to. Understand and know what your product is and how you can distribute it past that. Once you're a book format, there's actually a lot of interesting ways to get books out that are somewhat, for some reason, more acceptable by the public than games for some reason. So there's a whole new avenue out there. So go for it. We're gonna move topics now, unless anybody has more questions about shipping. Again, we don't know all the answers. We're just speculating here.
We're just kind of talking about what's been trickling down.
But this is another one that's sort of related to that. Is that the idea of exclusivity? So like a Target exclusive or a Walmart exclusive or Barnes and Noble exclusive or whatever. So let's just first of all put it on the table out there that for anybody watching, this is a thing that the publishers don't necessarily want to do, but they pretty much have to do in order to secure that space on shelves. So if you don't know what a planogram is, if you've never worked in retail, a planogram is like, here's how my shelves are laid out all over, and every square inch of a store is monetized. Like, how much money does this end cap make? How much money does this, shelf make? And this shelf, at the bottom, at the middle, at the top. And it's all very mathematical and statistical, where Target themselves needs to make sure that whatever they replace game X with has to make them as much or more. Otherwise, it's not going to stay there. And so to do that, you need sell-through, lots and lots of sell-through. And our publishers are going to say, okay, we want the game to be in Target. Target's going to say, okay, here's the MSRP we want to buy it at. Here's the volume you need to print to supply all our stores. And we want a 2-month exclusivity contract on it. And that exclusive thing is going to have something special in it for Target buyers only.
And you still have to do it at the price point we tell you to.
Yes. And here's something that you might not know, is that if it fails, we're not paying you for those products.
You might have to buy it all back.
You might have to buy back. This doesn't happen all the time, but it happens an awful lot of times. This is why you see games go into liquidation at like TJ Maxx or Winners or any of those liquidation places. It's because they just couldn't sell where they were. It doesn't mean that they're not selling at other places. It means they couldn't sell where they were placed. And so that store took their warehouse full of, this particular product.
$5.
Sold it all to a liquidator for $3, who then sells it to you for $5.
Yeah. Even though it actually could be a popular game, but it was not at the place it was sold.
Right.
Or at least at that quantity.
Amy, this hair is also going to be gone by, it's also something that's going to dry up and go away, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you for saying you're not wearing a hat. Usually you're wearing a hat.
Yeah, I had a meeting before this, and not that my meetings don't allow me to wear hats. It's just, oh my gosh, I have a meeting. I stuck this on, and there's no hat nearby.
Yeah.
So this is more hair than I've ever had in my life, and it is annoying me all to get out, and I want it gone. My local barbershop just was opening tomorrow, so I will schedule an appointment as soon as possible. So yeah. So it is scary, Amy. Like the idea of putting something into a big box store, and like that's like a huge momentous occasion for most publishing houses and designers to see their game on a Walmart shelf, and then if it fails, you have to buy it all back.
Anyway, your contract is right.
Right, yeah. And this doesn't just happen with physical retail place. This also happens in online retail. So just be aware that if you're getting into some of these deals,
too. People don't necessarily know that, but Amazon does this too, even if it's their own mistake.
Yeah. So if you have anything like that, just make sure you read your contracts real carefully. And as a publisher, if you're a publisher trying to get into mass, just know what you're getting into.
Because there's a lot
it
of
can be a
positives.
great success.
So yeah, like this is the thing. I think everybody just thinks it's some sort of like crazy cash grab, but that's why I think we wanted to like preface with by the way, this is all the things that can happen and go wrong. But what's really good about it, okay, there's a few things that have actually shown incredible positive trends that actually benefit everybody, even though it means you might not get your game for 2 months at your local game store, because there's no one who has exclusive. It'll eventually dry up and they can sell the rest to somebody else. So I want you guys to picture what Target shelves looked like 10 years ago for games. Now I want you to think about what it looks like now. That's more than double the space. Now, already talking before about how much that space really costs. That is telling you that games are, at least in their long-term perspective, going to be moneymakers. It's worth putting the space for the games, right?
Yeah. So Target as a corporation
has decided,
done the math. They have actuaries.
Games make money.
Games make money.
Give them more space. In fact, where they make enough money, we'll have exclusive versions of things. Now, remember, the average person that's going to Target for that exclusive version, odds are they're actually probably intimidated and afraid to go to like a friendly local game store. In all honesty, they really are. They'll see, Pokemon cards, or they'll see Magic cards, or they'll see a bunch of Euros, and they're already like, this place is not for me. They don't get it yet. They don't get that all of that can be the same thing. So what you're really doing is you're getting people at the ground floor. This is their chance to actually pick up something they never would have picked up, because next time they might go to the friendly local game store, because guess who has a bigger selection than Target?
Right. And I mean, a lot of people are very, Monopoly and left, right, center. And
you gotta have games that get people, they have to learn the mechanics somewhere, guys. Like, we gotta stop hating. If they don't learn the mechanics, they're not going to the next level. They're not entering hobby.
Right. And so even those games that are like those ones, like let's say Villainous or whatever, that is sold at Target, they're still quite a little bit above a game like Uno. Right. And so
there's actual action allocation to locations. I'm like, I still think that's actually a really cool mechanic, even if I'm not like the biggest ever fan of the game. I'm like, there's something really cool about that idea.
Yeah. And I mean, this goes to another topic we were talking about this week, is innovation, but we'll get to that in a second. So the idea of a marketplace penetration into Target is literally, hopefully, tapping into people who would never in their wildest imaginations go on BGG or step into a friendly local game store, because they're not always so friendly, or buy it off of Amazon even, right? They're like impulse buy. Hey, look at that. That's a game about Disney princesses. You love Disney princesses. You love games. You like Monopoly. Let's play this, right?
Well, and that's the other thing is, to be fair, and this is, maybe a bit more of a female perspective, anybody can walk into a Target, buy a game, and feel no eyes, no judgment, no nothing. Nobody's even going to question what you pick up off of a Target shelf. The judgment or looks you do get going into a game store sometimes about what you want to pick up, the very fact that we had to say, hey, stop hating on Monopoly. Well, what if I went in to go buy a Monopoly and then I wanted to pick up a Catan or something? The minute my hand went on that Monopoly, a bunch of you already know the eyes you would have given to that person, whether you knew you were or not, right? And there's employees that do that. And as much as they're trying to be friendly, it's like there's something very intimidating. So considering more than 50%,
it's judgmental. It is
because we all know that it happens.
But yeah.
Like, let's say more than 50% of game consumers are female. Like, we're over half now. Yeah. If that's true and they're intimidated by going into a place, guess where they're going to go instead?
The places are not intimidated.
Like, I can throw games in my cart while I'm grocery shopping. Okay.
Sure. Let's do that. Well, I mean, that was a big trend in like the, early 2000s, where grocery stores all of a sudden had like toys and games and clothes and things like that. It's like, yeah, why wouldn't you? Because I mean, even any of those other things, like clothing stores, for some people are really judgmental
or intimidating, like, or whatever they are.
Right. Whatever it is. Yeah.
And so there's a convenience element. But I will say that, the major thing really comes down to the first time buyer does not walk into a friendly local game store. A second or third time buyer might, but a first time buyer does not.
Yeah, unless they know for some reason that is the only place they can get that thing.
But that means they've already been introduced enough to not be that first time.
Yeah. So yeah, even when like some of my first games were published, my friends were asking, "So where can I get that?" I said, "Oh, where's the local hobby shop in your city?" And they're like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
Okay, tell me what city it is, and I'll send you there.
It might be mixed in with comics, or it might be mixed in with
Yeah.
like other. Yeah. Anyway, when you're new to a hobby, it is super intimidating to walk into a well-established thing that is specialized in that.
Yeah, Adam had a really good point. He said when all my friends were discovering Catan years ago, they didn't think I need to find a game store. They asked box stores, if they
could
had
bring it
Catan.
in.
Yeah. And today they would get there and see other hobby games around those and be able to buy them. So yeah, I mean, like even Best Buy is a good example because I know the buyers for Best Buy, and they electronics. You can say, why do they need analog games? They sell all these video games. No, they also during the Christmas season always want to have a supply of the best board games for the year there.
Oh, you know what? I was actually was it Hasbro or Mattel? Somebody now even has one of the two has game stands at gas stations now.
Yeah,
because there was nothing open, right? Or it's like I'm on the road. There's nothing. It's all family, all kids. It's usually near the front.
They might even be travel
cardboard
versions.
Stack. Occasionally, sometimes it's a cardboard stack, so the display already comes as how they're packaged. It's quite clever on their part.
Oh, right. So they've made the cardboard cutout. You just
the games are in it, right?
There it is.
Yeah, it's not necessarily like a point of sale display. Like it's way more simple than that. So they obviously save some money there. But I've seen them at like a ton of gas stations now.
No, that's awesome. Hasbro's really, really good at that. There, if you ever go to a hobby shop that's open, check out like their Magic learning stations. They have done a great job with that as well. And I mean, this is why they are industry leaders, right? It's not because of
where
Uno
can you get the consumer next. It's like put it in front of their face.
Yeah, and they have the money to obviously do this and fail. If they fail at this, it's not going to sink the ship that is Hasbro. It may sink, another smaller publisher who can't invest the money to make those risks to market. But that is really like when you market properly, you will make that back.
Well, what it really says is that go where the consumers are. So yes, they have more power to figure out where the consumers are than you, but it just goes to show like the average person can still say, hey, where do people tend to stop a lot? Right? Like there are ways of like, a few years ago, if I said that to someone, it's like, that is the out of the box thinking. They put them in gas stations, right? But if you think about it, it's like, where was if the consumer wasn't allowed to go anywhere other than a grocery store, where were they allowed to go? Genius.
Yeah, it is. It is really, really, really thoughtful. And so, yeah, when we have exclusivity at big box stores, I don't think we're going to see Shell having exclusive board games. Although we might.
No, that's all the stuff you could get almost anywhere, right?
I know. I'm kidding.
But it just goes to show you that it's like, we're talking about pivoting here. Even the big guys are pivoting pretty quick. If the little guys think they can get away not doing it, I think this is kind of like look what the big guys are willing to do now.
Yeah. Amy asks, so sorry I missed the shipping conversation part at the beginning tonight. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how scary is this year for a baby publisher like me?
So we're saying get in with other people and you might actually have a chance.
Yeah. Or pivot to manufacturing in local climates.
Oh, actually, because Amy's is card based, they're actually
Amy, you're like almost 100% card. You could probably pivot really hard to an American or Canadian manufacturer and still have
your unit price
a
might be
decent
better.
Unit price.
Yeah, than what
it might be better now
to have the container come over.
Right.
Or
the other thing,
or on time.
Well, that's the other thing is like timely due dates and things like that. But the thing that's interesting though is that if the industry starts supporting the manufacturing side of the industry,
it would grow.
They might grow.
Well, imagine you had a lineup of
things, right?
You have a lineup of people waiting to print something, right? Well, now you have a viable business.
Yeah.
Someone just has to want to get it set up. But again, I really do think the main lesson from a lot of what's going on right now is as an individual, we have almost zero buying power. But as a collective, we actually have quite a lot. And we've worked way too long independently because we're so informal. But I don't think that's going to fly in the future. And I think it's going to be really important that people figure out a way of organizing. And the buying power alone will be that reason.
So the other thing you can do with buying power, which people probably don't know because the most people are very small. But if you're a bigger company and you can promise, hey, I'm going to publish not just this 5,000 copies, but 10 games, each at 5 to 10,000 copies. Let me tell you what that printing house will do for you. They will bend over backwards because they now know they have 50,000 copies.
They have their year committed,
copies,
sort of thing.
Right? And that's all they want. They need to keep their machines running all year long, every day, to make their money off of that machine. That's all they want. The less flipping around of stuff they have to do, like if a printing house could print just your game for the rest of the year and you were paying them, they would be the happiest printing house in the world because they would never have to change anything except add more ink and paper. And that's exactly what they want.
Nothing basically is shut off. Yeah. All the molds.
They never want to shut down. They never want to, they never want to turn anything off, place anything. They mean obviously maintenance and stuff, and the die needs to be sharpened, and that's stuff, normal maintenance. But any of the resetting of stuff or calibration of thing because it's now a new piece of paper, that's what they want to avoid.
Or the engineer that has to go in to do all that doesn't have to come in.
And I mean, that stuff is happening all the time anyway, but the least amount that can happen, the better. So Amy, if you're thinking about, hey, why don't I pivot to America? If you could find a bunch of like-minded people who have similar products that, it's all cards all the time.
Or something paper-based, yeah.
Yeah, cards and board, that's it. And maybe like easily sourceable plastic parts. You might actually be able to come up with like a conglomerate, like a with enough buying power to say to a company like Delano, hey, we're going to buy up your time for 6 months of the year. What's that worth to you?
Now what's our unit cost?
Right. Exactly. So I a lot of this is finagling, and I know this is not where I want to be.
It's not everyone's favorite place, but I think it'll make or break some people if they don't kind of start to explore these possibilities.
Yeah. And like I said, if you can keep a company optimally engaged and working for 5 months, 6 months of the year because you and 10 other friends are just printing through them, that's worth something.
I feel like this is the perfect time to get organized in whatever capacity people are capable of.
Yeah. Oh, Amy's also real good at this. She put games everywhere, gift stores, groceries. And I think
that's how you get consumers. Where are the people?
Yeah. Where are the people? Where are the people? Where's your target audience? And we spend so much time in hobby yelling at hobby stores and yelling at the hobby market.
They're like, there's like one per town. Like, come on, guys.
Yeah. We forget that there's all these other people, all these other places that would probably really like that. And so I always take pictures of the games that are put in my bookstore at my college. Because
bookstores, actually, gift stores are great ones too, because guess what? Half the people running out to buy games, especially if they're not already gamers themselves, someone's always guaranteed to be a gift. So you just have to have it in front of their face.
Yeah. It's just got to be the right product for the place. That's sort of the thing, Is it going to be the cost that... And so in my bookstore, if you're selling giant Jenga for, $90, I might buy it as a professor.
Well, I was going to say, what?
I don't know if any of the students are going to buy that.
Year? Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what they do buy is a whole lot of Magic cards. They buy a lot of Magic cards.
Like I was going to say, even like simple decks of cards, like really like base games. Like I would sell super quick.
And puzzles sold out. Puzzles were always selling out. But the bigger board games were, so the smaller board games were. The bigger board games, once you got to like over 30, it was dicey.
Group games.
And a game that was like, this is $20 and you can sit up to 8 people. That's like gone.
That would sell like crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of it is finding the right place to put the game that you made, right? And getting to the market that is your market, which is I think
Takes
easier
effort.
said than done.
Yeah,
But
no, it'll take effort. It'll take a little bit of thought and research on your part. None of it will technically cost you anything other than time, but you're going to have to do it.
Amy, that's awesome. Amy said, I just landed a local Pacific Northwest grocery store chain, and it's been huge for me.
Oh, that would be huge.
17 stores.
Point of sale in like either the gift aisles, or like it's got like the stuff aisles, like where the toy, like the toys,
I know what you're talking
like the
about,
seasonal stuff, or point of sale right at the cash.
Wow.
Something like that. I could see a lot of people being like, "Oh, I'll take a little game home."
Yeah, especially if it's like, 10
The right
bucks,
price
15
point.
bucks,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
It's still in that add-on range where you'd be amazed how many people are willing to be like, yeah, let's give it a try.
So here's the magic. If it costs more than one single bill, most people won't buy it.
It's kind of true.
Not on an impulse anyways. And this is with paper money, but even with digital money, it's like, is it over 20 bucks? Well, I got to think about it now. Very cool. So Adam says people forget this stuff in marketing too. Yeah. Oh, totally. Right. I listen to so many comedians and podcasts full of people I know love games.
They don't.
But nobody ever advertises to or around them. So many opportunities, I think, to reach listeners. You're right. It's funny. I don't know if you know who Jackie Cation is. Jackie Cation's a comedian, but her husband's a game designer, and it's like, yeah, I mean, there's so many opportunities that we could have to have those sort of ancillary voices, to reach out in their areas and talk about the things that they
Honestly,
like.
we should have more product placement. It'd be like the only okay, so set designers, unless they're gamers themselves, they don't bring their games in. But think of what even Big Bang did for like anything that was even in the background. Or
Yep.
I was talking to Tanya Thompson this weekend, and she was like, I mean, they didn't give it to her, but like just because Billie Eilish put a Twister game in one of her videos, it was like that thing sold like gangbusters. It could be so casual,
Right.
and yet it still will act as an advertiser. And I'm not saying everyone is going to be able to have access to Billie Eilish, but there are tons of people. I mean, YouTube is basically turned into a TV station for most people. There are so many people that already target your demographic range who maybe they're not like the most established person ever and going to ask you like $10,000 for like any type of product to influence, but there'll be people that you can form relationships with. But again, all of this is going to take you the time to go do this. And if you ever want to talk to me, I have so many ideas for YouTube that are not usable to me. And I give them to anybody who's talking. So
yeah, it's remarkable. There's been so much interest that's happened. Even just TikTok. I don't love TikTok. I think it's real weird. I'm old, right? So, but I get it.
The video version of Snapchat is what I'm thinking. And it's going to be
really.
like, it'll fizzle out. But at the same time, I think it's something or like an Instagram, right?
It's like Vine. It's like Vine.
It's something really quick, short, like, but if the people, like I would say YouTube is turned into what cable TV used to be for people.
Yeah.
But anybody can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if some influencer, I hate that word, but if somebody likes your thing,
what they like to call themselves anyway. So.
Bam! Huge.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting just how far that kind of stuff can go. So even just for like my game Jiangshi, which is a role playing game, so it's sort of different, but because we got press in one thing, and then it led to press in another bigger thing, which led to press in this huge thing, right? So we were in we were written up in the Huffington Post, which was super wonderful and awesome. But then just after that, the Nikkei Index, which is the biggest Japanese national business newspaper, with like circulation of 2 million. They interviewed us too. It was ridiculous. It's like, this is weird stuff when people just out of the woodwork are coming to talk to you about your game because it's interesting. And I think more people are finding out about it because there is more interest about it, because more people in positions of influence are gamers, right?
Right. Or at least they have the disposable income for it. So they're the consumer at the very least.
Yeah. But even like if you look at, well, I mean, think about what IPs are coming out in the next couple of years in board games. They're
All of them.
all of them, but they're usually targeted. They're usually targeted at people my age, like in the 40s and 50s. Why? Because that's where the disposable income is, like Erica's saying. But also, those are the people who typically have a lot of clout in their jobs and can communicate about that freely without facing repercussions or whatever. So, there is something to be said about aiming for or discussing with a demographic that has a voice. Now, in TikTok, the 50, 40-year-olds don't have any voice at all. So you should be aiming at a different audience if you want TikTokers to talk about it. And you should invent a little dance to go with it. A hopping vampire dance would be real easy, though. So I don't know.
I still find someone else who does it better for you guys. Don't.
Yeah. You don't have to do it yourself.
You don't have to be the entertainer. And I think too many people think they have to be all the things. Someone else has the personality. You just, create a relationship with them.
Yeah. And I know it costs, but maybe that cost is worth it.
But you know what? You better have a marketing budget by now. Okay. Like, I'm sorry.
If you're self-publishing, yes. Marketing. So many people, I've had to kind of drum it in their head. Hey, coming to a con in a different country, because we're in Canada, and so many people are like, I don't want to come to Canada. Don't put it as your sales budget. Don't put this is not a sales trip. This is a marketing trip. This is marketing. Put in your marketing budget line, and you won't be upset. Because when they do it on sales, they need a return. When you do it on marketing, it's like, I don't need a return. The return is supposed to be later.
The other thing is that I think people need to understand a bit more about marketing, that when you put money towards something, even if you don't see immediately on necessarily that one thing, it doesn't mean that it hasn't necessarily created an audience for you wider than that. So I think there's this idea that if I don't specifically see a return on this thing like 1 month later, my advertising efforts were for nothing. What you don't realize is that, okay, one of the main reasons when you go to the grocery store, you pick up the products you do, because funny enough, people are not that brand loyal. If it's not on sale, it's because
except for mayonnaise.
Well, like, unless you're like picky about flavor, just in general, like in most grocery store products, people are not that brand loyal. It's more about the cost. And so if it's not sale based, meaning it's on promo, then what's really making you buy it? And honestly, exposure is key. I bought it because I recognize it.
Yep.
By the way, that same principle works for games.
It does. Adam Young is saying, even just in the ad breaks of podcasts, people are marketing all the time, but we're hearing like about ZipRecruiter and a bed, a phone bed.
It doesn't need to be the ads that I like iTunes is placing. And this is a big one I've got for YouTube too, is okay. Fine, they're in control of that ad space, but guess what? All the other time is in control of the content creator. So fine, YouTube, let's say, is going to pay, charge somebody to put the ad space in. Will you contact the creator and you be the lead out commercial into their commercial time? There are so many ways to work this that you're not going through some big nondescript company where you're working on your basically how many gross rating point you're going to get across your buy. That's all what a media buyer looks at, is what's the audience? How far can I spread this? It'll get stuck in places it doesn't need to be, but that's just because it makes it a better buy deal. Don't worry about that. That's something totally different. But
you may get a conversion. Who knows?
Yeah, but ultimately, there are better ways to do this. If I reached out to the podcast directly myself and actually worked with them to do an podcast commercial rather than the things that get cut in by Amazon or not, whoever, right? Or YouTube or iTunes, they all do this, but the person with the actual podcast or the content doesn't always have control or get what's shown. It's just shown to their demographic type. Guess what? You can target better yourself.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to do it. We don't need to hear about drinks and tax services. We need to hear about the games.
But that's what's getting placed. But we could place ourselves, is what I'm saying.
Well, no, sometimes actually, there's a lot of podcasts that get sponsored by something, right? And so,
but that's what the reaching out is for your demographic range.
Right. So we as companies should be reaching out to the nerdy podcasts that we like and say, hey, I'll buy some of your ad time.
Yes.
That's what
it'll be in, Because ultimately what happens is that, so let's say I'm Squarespace or whoever likes to throw money everywhere, or like
Squarespace does.
Yeah.
For sure.
When I'm doing that, it's because, well, you met my media budget, my marketing budget. You are the, I don't know, the 49 to whatever range. And I don't care what you're there for. You're just the right age demographic.
Yes.
That is how that placement works.
Yeah. Versus a targeted ad buy, which is much more specific.
It's also more expensive, and you can't really do it with podcasts, but you could do it yourself very easily.
Matt Paquette says he made it. He's thankful to be here before it ended, and he says, "Congratulations, Erica."
Thank you.
And so does Ian O'Toole. He says, "Congratulations, and hope the job is off to a great start, Erica."
It's fun. It's busy, but it's fun.
Yeah, and so Adam says the bigger podcasts, you hear them read the ads themselves, and yes,
that's because they have control.
Yeah, so that's the ones that we're talking about. Like, it's a sponsor, but they are reading it themselves, so not a cut in from the streaming service or whatever.
Yeah, and even in the description of the podcast itself, like let's say it's a podcast, it could be YouTube, doesn't matter what it is, whatever the description is, it is very easy to put a link in both of those. So you can drive people wherever you want to from there on top of it.
Yeah, so the show notes or, the things like that. So yeah, lots and lots of stuff. Last topic. Oh, I don't have one. Does anybody out there have a question for us? Because I'm out of topics here. We talked about shipping.
I guess
we talked about exclusivity. We talked about a little bit of marketing.
Honestly, I think a big one is more going to just be how people deal psychologically with going back to what they hope normalcy will be. Because a lot of us are like, oh, cons starting. It's like, is this going to be normal? And I think there's going to be a lot of, well, what does even normal look like anymore? You can't have back with something that's, I'm not saying it's gone, but it's going to be different. And considering we know how much hobby gamers in particular are not necessarily fond of change, I do not know what this is going to look like, because a lot of what they want isn't possible.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Very true. Yeah, I think people are just going to have to, watch themselves, hydrate, obviously, have some time away from other people, but manage yourself and just watch yourself. So you remember how we used to talk about, these are the things you need to do: eat a meal, take a shower, change clothes, honestly, those types of things.
I think people
still need
realize,
to keep on doing those.
Yeah, I don't think people are going to realize. Like, this is something I've always had to do just because of my ADD. I get overstimulated, and I know when to step out now, because I'm an adult who has to manage, actual emotions. If you have never been in that situation before, there's the very real possibility of not only heightened anxiety, but things like anxiety attacks and stuff like that you will not know how to control, because you've never been in that situation before. You're not used to yourself, what it feels like to be amped up or that stressed or whatever it is. Even if you think you are, you're not. A big thing is going to be that if you start feeling jittery or off or anything like that, if any type of that vibration feeling starts, you're going to go take a time out, because you're not necessarily going to be in a place to deal the way you normally would have. And so I'm telling you, as someone who deals with stuff like this a lot, you have to learn when to say, like, you're not going to be good at recognizing your overstimulation. So you're going to have to say, I need quiet. I need the down. If you're someone who puts on headphones, do that. If you listen to music, if you need to go to your room, whatever it is, you're going to have to do this regularly to bring yourself back down.
Build those times in anyway. You don't have to be constantly playing games to make a con worthwhile. Matt said that his very first Gen Con was very overstimulating. I actually remember talking to you about that, Matt, when you were like, I think you were saying you were kind of like just standing shocked at how much stuff happens around you. Yeah.
And so you don't know what that's like until it happens. And so I'm just giving a heads up, because I think a lot of people, watch out. All I'm going to say is, you might think you're doing okay. You might think you're happy, but you don't realize that anxiety doesn't mean you're upset. Anxiety can be, you are actually just, you're overexcited.
Yep.
Right. But and ultimately they can all border into attacks.
Yep. Amy, of course, gives us the good mom advice of wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Okay.
Good one.
By the way, that's the best way to kill a common cold. The hand sanitizer is actually better against the flu and COVID, but you want the best thing against a cold is actually washing your hands.
Ian O'Toole says, every Essen, he does his best to book 0 meetings on the Saturday, turn up late, or even better still, relax and play games away from the show. Well, yeah, that's a great thing.
You have to.
I actually do the same thing. Like, well, I mean, I build in time to play games because I normally don't play games when I'm at con because I think it's all business all the time. And now it's like, nope, not doing that. I'm definitely taking one night out to play a role-playing games with the people that I don't see all year round, right? So,
well, it's half the time when I get to play things I've like probably never even heard of before.
Right?
Like, let's be honest, it's that those are the best times to just go with it. Don't plan everything. Have stop out times. Even have, you're not being antisocial if you go to play a game in your room with like a small group.
You're not.
I think there's so many people who are like, you're leaving me out. It's like, no, this isn't a birthday party. You're not invited. Like, it's okay if we go to play a game, because the thing is, it is too much. Like, it's too much. You need that lack of sound, lack of visuals, whatever it is that's throwing you off. So you're not saying I don't like people. If you're going to your room to play a game, it's your way of saying like, I'm going to take care of myself so I can keep going.
Yeah, I have a limit. I'm playing within it. For those of you who are from Ontario, like Matt Paquette is. Matt Paquette says, with the exception of Gamma, CODs going forward will be strictly leisure for me, no planned business. Yeah, we talked about that too, Matt, offline or online at some other point in time. Yeah, it's a big mental change, and it's a good, healthy change for some people, right? Mm-hmm. Essen has become a 6-day event for Ian, plus 30 hours of travel.
That's too much. Just like,
yeah. So without a day off, you'll collapse, right? And you're in a different country. Go experience it.
Yeah, it's funny. My mom used to travel a ton when I was little. And the funniest thing is how often she'd go somewhere and essentially say, yeah, but I didn't see it.
Yep. That's how I feel about academic conferences, to be honest.
You don't see the place you're in, right?
I see the conference center.
When it's busy. When it's business, for sure.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I could go and see other things, but I feel guilty if I go and see other things, but
it's also how much
I know other friends who don't at all feel guilty. So it's like, I should be more like them. Matt asks, what would be considered the bigger podcast in this industry?
See, and actually, get rid of the industry part.
Yeah, that's my first. I'm actually suggesting don't do that at all. Ian O'Toole says that I think it's reasonable to expect there to be a large potential audience crossover with other geek culture podcasts.
Yes, exactly. That's what Target is doing.
And now we are marketing. That this is marketing. This is not just advertising. Now we are marketing because we are burgeoning out into other potential markets.
Yes, people need to stop talking to ourselves.
Conflate the two.
That's my number one thing. We got to stop talking to ourselves.
Like, I really like you, Erica, but I'm not going to tell you about my game. A, because you co-designed it, but B,
you're not going to convert me because I'm going to buy it anyway. Like, that's the thing, is you're not getting anywhere if that's where you're spending your money, because that person was already buying. And now the only difference is maybe they were buying your game now, but they were already buying. You don't necessarily want that person. You want the person who's never picked up the game, because then they're coming back for the rest of your catalog. Yeah.
And I think you're right, Ian. Ian also writes here, especially if you know there's a host that you know plays games, right? So
they know
that's the idea, is identify some nerds out there who like board games, and
use
your advice for them.
Yeah, go for video games. Go for and even just people who are geeky personalities. Their show could be something totally random. It's amazing how many people do comedy RPG podcasts now, right? These are not gamers necessarily, but they're having fun with storytelling. This is still your same audience, though.
Yeah. So Ian O'Toole suggests Jeff Kanata's podcast. He's a board gamer and has a big audience in video games and film podcasts. Cool. Right? So that's the thing. It's like, out there are definitely people who like board games. So,
I'm sure they'd even like free board games.
Yeah, there are lots of celebrities who like board games, but there are lots of these, podcasters who are kind of celebrities, but not really celebrities, that also like board games, and finding them and giving them the product. So it's actually really interesting. So, because I work a lot in IP, and so does Erica, our games go out to weird and wild places like comic book blogs and things like that, which is great because we also like comic books. But it's real interesting to see the difference in what they are looking for or what they talk about versus what gaming blogs or game centric blogs talk about. So game centric ones will be, and in this turn you do this mechanic, and this mechanic was really fun.
That's
In a
not
comic book blog,
converting
it's not at all about that. It's about,
No.
wow, this was amazing art, and I felt like the rat queens when I was swinging my sword, and blah blah blah.
I want us to honestly start looking at the gaming industry like a movie industry. You are selling a story. You are selling an experience. It is entertainment. We genuinely need to start treating it, because honestly, there is very little difference to the way you would advertise a movie to the way you would advertise a game.
You are correct. Amy says she's had luck reaching out to people who have a presence on YouTube and Instagram about lifestyle, fashion, and mental health. Yes, because Amy's games are all about those things.
Yeah,
they're super cool looking, and they're communicative games, right?
Visual style can be enough to make a connection with somebody.
Yeah.
If you happen to have something based in a certain time period, I don't care what it is, you know what I mean? The thing is that if you can find somebody who there's, that audience, there you go. You just open up to a whole new person. Like, I mean, one of the biggest things we talked about with Wingspan is it doesn't even matter whether or not people are super, super in love with the play. The number of people in the Audubon Society is insanity. And you got to them through the images. You think they understand what anything in the game happened when they read about it? No, they go, pretty birdies, I want it.
And they have, a lot of them have money.
But this is what I'm saying is that it went directly after a completely different hobby group who, in all honesty, has almost zero care about games. That is not what they bought it for. And if you advertise it purely as a game, they would not have bought it.
Yep. Yeah. Very, very interesting, Amy. Daniel Rocky, who says, there's a great quote from theater director Urjo Correda. Nobody ever made a career in history by putting on a show. Oh, yeah. In theater, sorry, by putting on a show for 100 of their goofy friends.
That's kind of what we're constantly doing in the industry.
Hey, Daniel, you want to buy my game? And he'll say yes, and that's the one that I sold.
So Matt was saying so this is good advice for business to consumer. What about business to business? I guess it really depends right now. We were kind of talking about that earlier with the shipping. I don't think hobby works together enough. I think there's too much every man for themselves, and what they don't realize is that ultimately that's going to crush most of them.
Yeah.
So business to business comes down to, I think there really needs to be more partnerships happening, because like if you're talking about selling to the consumer, like that's easier because I'm saying, hey, my product is fun, or look at this person playing it. If we're talking about going back to selling to a Target or someone like that, it does come down to, okay, but what catalog are you showing them? What, when you finally get in front of that buyer, do you have the right product? And so that again comes down to maybe you need to be more grouped together. So when I go in, I've got like 15 things that happen to be in the family category, even though maybe that's 5 different publishers put together. One representative can go and say, here's my portfolio of 15 family games. Which ones will make it on your shelf? And since everybody, that person is not doing anything against the games who don't make it, it's now that all of them had the potential to be shown.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think another thing for business to business, for Matt, for your particular business of being in graphic design and that kind of stuff, I think it's really just diversifying in some ways that are still linked to your core. So I know you're moving into art direction, and maybe even having an illustrator or a concept artist on hand. There's ways to offer more for not less, but for an amount that people find valuable.
Yeah, creating services kind of things. Yeah, like a boutique. Funny enough, Matt, you and one other person could probably constitute like a design boutique. It just depends on like how you would start billing yourself.
Yeah. And so like Quillsilver does this very well, where they have Danny doing the art and the graphic design and stuff, and then Brenna doing like the development and the marketing. And so there's definitely different types of boutique houses that are business to business. Kira Peevely, the one that she runs, also does like more marketing side of things and event management and coordination. So I think there's different ways that boutiques can work.
Well, also they're a good excuse. Like, let's be honest, we're not all experts at everything. We have strengths. And so oftentimes we forget that we should really be looking for those people who offset those.
Yeah.
Right.
Or complement them in some way, like just adjacent, but one step away. Right.
And that's a big part of working together too, right? Is that, I think, again, we want to do it on our own. We don't have the buying power. We don't have it's just not feasible and not on the level that we want to get to. That if it's going to be the big explosive industry that we all hope and are already kind of seeing evidence of, well, we're going to have to learn how to actually do that, because right now it is so informal that half the things you learn in this industry is just because you hung around long enough and talked to people. Like, it's
Right?
true though.
Yeah. Off Duty Ninja is Kira Peevely's company. And I mean, we're going to see we talked about, will the bubble burst on the golden age of gaming? We've talked about it for the last 4 or 5 years. I think
It's
the
not going to
pandemic
burst. Things are just
is
ramping
going
up
to
what's
change
new.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Ian O'Toole said, back to the podcast thing, there's a lot of crossover potentially through your game's theme.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know if this particular podcaster does ads.
Like we said, Wingspan is a perfect example where that theme got it to every one of those other demographics that has nothing to do with gaming. Again, they have no concept of what's happening in that box. They did not buy it for gameplay. They bought it for the birds.
They might like games, but they just that's not
what got them to spend the money. Like, I will tell you flat out, that is not what got them to pick it up, though.
Yep. So I mean, we often look for that. We're talking about that sliver of the Venn diagram where this is a gamer who also likes birds. It's like, no, just birds.
Just go after the gamers, people.
And there might be some that are in the middle. That's great.
But then they'll get their friends hooked anyway. So don't worry about them.
Don't worry about them. Don't cater to that small sliver. Cater to the bigger piece of the pie, the wheel, the whole circle. So Ian was saying that someone like Dan Carlin has a huge audience that's interested in, say, history. He does all the history podcasts. I can't remember what they're called, but anyways, yes.
Yeah, his was that one that's like the super real history one, or I forget what the name of it was called now.
Yeah.
Yes, what you're targeting is, you're not going to gamers. You're just talking in the peripheral of, okay, they're consumers of more than just games. And so oftentimes this is where it comes down to the advice of, you need to market it like it's a movie. There we go. Hardcore history. I knew it was like the more real history stuff.
That's right.
You need to make it that, it's the person who would be buying your game if they knew about it. Gamers don't need that message. They'll find it anyway. Like, I really do believe that. So you need
it's a little different from finding it out first day Kickstarter, but they'll find it eventually if it has a longer tail.
Yeah,
which is kind of the problem, right?
On like BGG, guess who you're getting?
Well, I know, and I think that's kind of this weird short-term vision that we have with the Kickstarter era, right? It's like, I need that huge first day push, which is sort of short-sighted, right? In a way, because you are obviously concentrating. Most people concentrate most of their, their ad buy, their time and presence to that core gamer demographic that they know will understand what I'm selling. They will put down $50 sight unseen on this, and we're good to go.
But odds are they're already looking at Kickstarter to begin with.
And then they forget everything else, right? Well, I mean, yes and no. Some of them are like, this is the first time I've ever heard about this. It was after the campaign was over and they feel all disappointed. So obviously, some people just aren't doing enough. I don't know. But I think Kickstarter leans us into this hyper-focused, this is the industry and it's all it can be. Whereas the idea of having this longer tail for things is a good idea. Now, for small press is like, Kickstarter is the only way my game ever gets made. Mm. So how do I move from the small press mentality of just yelling at gamers to now my game's out there, I want to get it out more. How do I make that pivot? I think that's where people have to get to now. It's like, can we pivot to this other thing?
I think they're also not giving the right ramp up time. I think there's so many people who think like, oh, I'm going to put something up like a month before.
Well, that's the other thing, is because Kickstarter is so temporally based, your ads are weak. Your ad buy is weaker because of that, right? Because you have a window of maybe 24 days, 31 days, whatever you set it at. And if your ad buy doesn't hit the person during that period, even if they really wanted it, they can't get it, or they have to wait for a year to get it. So I think the Kickstarter mentality actually hurts how games are marketed now.
Or they fold even when they're technically successful because, oh, well, this wasn't the first day, therefore we won't make our numbers. It's like,
oh yeah,
how
I
do
mean
you
that's a
know
whole other
that?
thing, right?
Like, how do you know that?
Well, I mean there is
No,
analysis, but
there is analysis, but that's also assuming that every campaign functions exactly the same, and we're constantly seeing that change.
yeah, well that, and also um, the
It's how much
the perception of, well, if that wasn't your real goal, why did you set it at that?
Well, honestly, I don't think I know companies do it because they have in their head like a dollar amount to hit,
Yep.
right? But the thing is, it's like if you're funded and you cancel your campaign, that doesn't look good, even though it's like, because there's not a lot of people as consumers that sit there and go, I get the business decision why this was made. They say, wow, that's a greedy company.
Yeah, sometimes for sure that's definitely happened. And other times they're going, no, I understand because you wanted to have this in it.
Yeah, but
and we couldn't get it at the price.
the
Well, then
average
you should have put
person
that
does
in.
well, the average person doesn't hear that.
Yeah. It's a weird mentality.
Like, look how
around all
many
this stuff.
gamers are like clamoring about like my game's not here, and it's like that they have access to all the information saying like a publisher's going,
Here's
oh my
why
god,
your
nothing's
game's not
shipping.
here.
Like, if
Yeah.
they're still willing to say stuff like that with full information, you think the average random person is gonna care at all why you canceled your campaign?
No.
No, you just
They're
became the
not.
greedy company to them. No
Yeah.
matter what your intent was, they're not looking into that. You
Yeah.
got your money and you wasn't enough for you and you turned it off. And I'm sorry, I know that's not the actual reason that people do this, right? Again,
Yeah.
I get the business perspective. The consumer does not get the business perspective.
And nor
though.
do they care half the time.
Why should they?
Well, I think a lot of times the consumers think of Kickstarter as a store,
They think of
opposed
it as a
to,
purchase.
which
Yeah.
it's not, but
But
it
let's be
kind of is
fair, to be
until.
honest, a lot of publishers use it like one anyway.
Yes, so it's weird. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack about that. That's better left for another day, perhaps. And Ian O'Toole is saying, yeah, the cross interest marketing can get tricky if it's time sensitive, like a Kickstarter campaign. You might grab someone from a bird watching podcast with a theme, but if they have to overcome the hurdles of our board games fun as well as acclimatizing to crowdfunding, that's a big ask. And especially if they just like, now I'm in this thing and I'm getting all this other stuff.
I will agree the crowdfunding is, but let's put it this way. Even if any advertising efforts that went to let's say Wingspan as an example, past gamers, even if that person doesn't necessarily, 100% buy Wingspan, you don't think that the Stagmeyer name has just become a little bit more accessible or knowledgeable to them? Like it actually exists in the world now.
Yeah,
The rest of you don't.
That's very important, right?
Well, that's the value that people are not seeing.
Right, it's that brand recognition, right?
Brand recognition is huge if you want someone to pick up a product they've never picked up before. Why do you think that, products blitz the way they do when they first release?
It's trust. You trust that brand to produce the thing that you want.
Well,
to
and
deliver
so
an experience that you want or whatever.
There is
right?
something to that, right? Like, think about the first time you kind of got into, let's say if the first time you got into a game, a hobby game you really liked, and almost everybody does this. What do? You go check out the rest of the line.
Yeah, the rest of that catalog.
Or anything else that has been compared to it, right? There's no difference.
No, not at all. Yeah, so there's a very important thing for your brand recognition, maintaining your brand, getting your brand right, which Matt and I talk about a lot in terms of your brand usage, your logo usage, all that kind of stuff.
It all matters. I know
stuff.
it's hard. I know it's hard. Like, this is a lot because this is why people have degrees in this stuff. It's hard, but you have to keep pushing through these steps. And ultimately, I think if you get anything from this episode, don't do it on your own.
Yeah, so use the resources that are there. There are experts in all these areas that you might not be. It is worth your time and money to invest a little bit in yourself to learn about that, either by doing courses or by just, paying somebody else to teach you about it while they're doing it, right? So,
or, you guys, Fiverr. You can even hire people like who will do those side things for you that you're not as good about. Like, but I would ultimately find somebody who's more of a long-term partner. But there's plenty of people out there who have the skills that you need, you know, who can help you out with some of this stuff in the short term too.
Yeah, Fiverr's a weird place.
I think of it more like if you wanted like small pieces done or like video editing or things like that, where to be honest, it's like, don't do that yourself.
Yeah, Ian's saying 100%. Brand visibility has value, but that's more long-term marketing in an industry that doesn't often invest in that, unfortunately,
They
right?
don't invest at all.
They will.
The only people who do, I would say, are the ones who realize that they can go up their brand levels.
Yeah.
So in some ways, like Haba's pretty good about this to a degree. There's a couple companies that are actually really good about getting people in alternate forms because, you know, you can't, like, no kid, you don't advertise to that age group the same way with games. You have to approach it differently. And ultimately, that'll still work for almost any type of game. But yeah, no one really puts the effort into like, hey, this is why the company is as awesome as the game.
Yeah, it's very difficult when they're so product forward and product facing
But I
and
think that's
pushing that
the
thing.
downfall is they
Yeah,
don't
no,
have to
that's a
be.
mistake. That's
Yeah.
kind of a mistake. You want to sell not just the game. You want to sell your brand as a long term.
Oink
This
is a
is
good
your
example.
brand from birth till death.
Yeah.
Right.
If you pick up one of these games because they worked hard to maintain their branding, their positioning, their like
integrity with that brand.
everything about it has been maintained, that I not only can I go to a shelf and like recognize, so Ian's talking about Haba and Oink, I could recognize those companies right away on a
Oh yeah,
shelf.
is it a yellow box that's a square?
Right, or is it the same like little
Small box.
small box with bright colors? And I know that if I pick it up, I'm probably going to get a good game experience, even if it's a very simple, you know, small game, right? Like, you know, I mean, Oinker is expensive here, but you know, they're really quick, easy purchases, you know,
Yeah.
in other parts of the world where they're actually made. You know, the difference between maybe like that $10 game or the $20 game, but you know, they have actually bred brand loyalty.
Yeah,
And
through their trade dress. Yeah,
right.
Matt, I can tell when the graphic designers are going off that this is important. Like Ian and Matt are like, trade dress,
It
brand
is.
identity.
It's super important. I had to actually explain that to someone today.
Why at work?
Well, one of the designers I'm working at just, you know, really wanted something to be bigger in an expansion. And I was like, look, ultimately the biggest problem is that it's not going to match the brand. What are you selling? Right? If this is the experience we're selling and you throw something in partway through that disrupts that brand image, well, what was the point in building it?
Right. Exactly. Why do we need that brand then? Or that brand is there for a reason, or that brand is the actual reason for this event to actually occur, or this game to actually be made.
It's just people don't think that way. They think, but that should be fun. You're like, maybe
you are serving many masters, my friend.
Yeah, it's like maybe it'll be fun, like maybe, right? But you know, there's a reason. Like Villainous is a great example. When you put all of those together, like what do you get?
Yeah, a consistent experience.
Right? You think that they would change randomly like one of the expansions as they kept going?
They better not.
Why would you build up the brand in the first place? No, but you know what I mean? Like what was the point of establishing it if you were just going to alter it? So what you don't realize is it's really important that if you've decided to commit to these things, that there is a reason for them.
And they're long term.
Right?
Potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Young says, consistency with internal product design is nice for our hobby crowd too. I know I'm going to get certain quality components and inside tray for similar price from some publishers, et cetera, et cetera. Right, exactly, right? So, and that's the thing, like, we all know that as soon as you see something that says game trays inside, that a lot of people in the industry are like, ooh, their interest get piqued. They know that generally speaking, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. Ian O'Toole says that Oink is one of the best in the business when it comes to brand equity, product design, and trade dress. Yes, and I don't know why. I've actually never met them. So I mean, I've talked to them just to buy stuff, but never actually talked to them about their design philosophy, especially their visual design philosophy, because it's
definitely have one.
It's so definitely me. That's entirely my kind of 2 colors, awesome. I'm in.
Totally
3 colors,
random.
maybe a little bit better.
Did you back their Switch game?
I forgot.
Oh, I did.
I figured most of my friends would, so I'll get to check them out eventually.
Yeah.
But Matt says a pet peeve of his is when publishers modify their logo to fit a theme. Those publishers don't know what they're doing. I'm kidding. I get why they're doing it, but it's
is
not
an element
good
to that. Because what it ultimately means is you don't know your brand well enough to know not to touch it.
Or your brand is malleable enough that you can touch it, and that's not a good thing.
Which is a problematic too, because that means you actually don't have a voice.
It's just a bad deal. Don't do it.
Well, like so your logo is what makes you recognizable. Now, if you can get your packaging and your logo to constantly do that for you, like the other 2 brands we just been mentioning this whole time, gravy. Right. But the biggest problem is if you keep changing it, it's okay. The best analogy is like looking at a person, and every time they come in, they're dressed like someone different. Now, it's still the same person, but are you going to have any real idea of who they are?
Well, it's going to be different. You have a different impression every time.
But that's the problem, right?
Yes.
So there's no genuine, like, again, this is a whole degree for a reason. But this is why I'm on a constant soapbox about branding and marketing, is I don't think a lot of people understand how essential it is to have this built into the foundation, because you're selling your company, you're selling your product as much as that's one specific SKU. All of it matters.
Yes. Ian has a great point. He says it's largely because Oink have a brand vision other than publish cool games.
It's true. And they're very, very careful about, it's like the number of time, the number of players, the types of like materials, like whatever it is, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, if for the designers out there who are game designers, definitely have a vision for your product. Have a vision for your games, try to stick to it as much as possible. Defining all that kind of stuff is really important. But then for a brand, it's also really important that they have a whole vision and like a mission statement and why do you exist? That's a good that's a good reason.
And if it's going to change, it's not a willy-nilly change. It is a very conscious branding effort of you as a company as a whole.
Yeah. Matt says this is not the same as a dynamic brand, which can appear differently to fit the application. The ad hoc spookifying of your logo for Halloween is not cool. It dilutes the brand. Yeah, and there's other ways you can do that anyway.
Well, it's kind of part of the argument going on with Pride right now. It's like, what? So the minute tomorrow hits, I notice everybody's logo changed back. It's like,
it's not even over.
What does that
Pride
say?
Day, everybody, or Pride Month.
Yeah, most people turn it off already. And so what does that really say? It's like, so you're following a trend, but are you actually have anything to do with, like, if your game you're not producing spooky games, you probably don't need to stick that on your logo.
Right. For that time of year, or even on a box of a game.
Well, then honestly, put a separate sticker on the side. Don't mess with your logo. Like, it's something separate to your brand.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is like a long diatribe on don't mess with your brand, people.
Yeah. Like if you have a mascot, you can dress them differently because it's not your brand yet. It's not your logo.
That's already a very intentional choice, is that I have a malleable, recognizable mascot that has costume changes.
Yes.
Like that in itself is already a brand decision.
Yes, but it should have been done a long time ago.
Yeah.
In order for a brand to be flexible in its rendering and application, it needs to be big enough to survive the translation. Yes. Yeah, that's exactly, because Google does it on like a regular basis, right?
Because all you have to say is Google and you know what you're talking about.
Yes. Whereas if it was something like, I don't know, Sen's Game Company, we couldn't do that.
No.
Nope.
Well, why would I ever know who you are?
I don't know.
Like, that's really what it comes down to.
Because I make cool games, Erica.
But it's like being schizophrenic. Like, it's like your messaging is too many faces.
Yes.
So who are you?
That is a good question. It's very existential. We might need more than. Oh my gosh, we're at 83 minutes, Erica.
This is why you need brand plans, people. It's actually part of your business plan, by the way. If you don't have this figured out, there's a core part of your business missing.
Yeah. If you don't have this figured out, you should actually go figure it out.
Please. And there's lots of great courses on it, and even just fundamentals in marketing or branding. I mean, they are different, but they'll interconnect.
And I mean, You can hire a professional. You can, but you should go learn because you
Know
are
what
the one
you're
that's going to
asking
define it
first.
first, right?
Yes, know what you're asking first, okay?
Before you go hire somebody like Matt or Ian to design you that logo, that's going to be your lifelong logo and stick and all the style guide for it. Know what your brand means. Know what your company stands for.
Like, what colors are your colors? Like, it sounds really silly, but it actually matters because there's a consistency that you're maintaining. You're saying, I'm worth paying attention to. Yeah, no, see, they get it. I love it. It's like all the people who get it are here.
Yeah. So Ian's saying a lot of this comes down to the common misconception that your brand starts and ends with your logo. It does not. Oh my gosh.
Hey, the size of your box can be part of your branding. The colors that go into it are part of your branding. The fact, like, you could have a specialized component that's in everything, that's part of your branding. You could be known as, like, we were talking about wacky places to stick your games. It's like you could be known as, like, always being in the grocery store. That is a form of branding in itself. Like, all of this can, Anyway, it is all usable, but it has to be deliberate.
So we are coming up at the 90-minute mark
We should
of a
probably
60-minute show. So Eric and I are going to say farewell. Hi, Jim. Sorry, Jim just dropped in. It's good to see everybody. Nice to have you with us. We had expected Carol Mertz and who else was there? Oh, Kai. To come in to talk about their game KROMA, which is on Kickstarter currently, so go check it out. It is that light game. It uses light. It's really cool, and they're going to come on next week to talk about the game and to also talk about their experiences.
But everyone's okay. But there is a bit of a nope. You're not coming on. We'll make it work later.
Yeah, and they will come in and talk about their cool game and their experiences at NYU's game lab place thing.
It's really
Game
cool
Centre,
to
the
see
Game
where like universities are going with game design programs.
Yeah, you know what, Adam, you're right. I think everybody should have a stint in freelance graphic design and marketing if possible. Like, seriously, it's a good skill to have.
It's a huge
very
factor.
Transferable.
Like, even when I plan games, I see them visually. I see them visually because I have that advertising background. I literally think in pictures, which means I'm technically thinking in product.
Yep. Matt's goals. One of Matt's goals this year is to determine and develop our corporate ethos. Ooh, that's fancy words.
We need one.
Yeah. And then Amy is saying, how are you feeling about Clubhouse these days? Well, we had to cancel a few because of reasons. I still think it's interesting. I haven't been on it much this month, but we'll see. And we'll see as things roll out how people are using it or not.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say I've noticed a usage change, but that might be a very different conversation.
Yeah. And it might just be pandemic's over-ish.
Well, it seems like people have turned into, I'm basically giving a lecture or seminar. I'm not actually talking as a group.
Yeah, I don't like those ones. I want people to talk.
It's been shifting a lot into that. At least that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. Thanks, everybody. It was great to see you all. Great to hear from you. Lovely to have you with us on a Wednesday night. And we'll talk to you all next week when we have the KROMA team with us. All right. We'll see you then. See you later.